Hi, I'm Paul Stringfellow, and welcome to this week's Tech Takeaways. As ever, I'm joined by my, I'm going to pinch his phrase, dynamic co-host, Jason. Jason, how you doing?
Hello, yeah, great. Yeah,
Good. Nice to have you here.
Yeah, thanks.
It's good. So, on this week's show, we're going to pick up on one of your favourite topics, I think, the mighty world of patch management.
Oh, love it.
Love a bit of patch management. We're going to patch the heck out of this next 15 minutes. So, hey, why don't we jump in straight away with what on earth we mean?
Well, when we're talking about patch management, essentially what we're talking about is updating systems and making sure that they are up to date with the most firmware, applications are updated and operating systems are updated. And the reason why that is important is because the updates that get applied will have security fixes that close the holes that would be open to attackers should you not patch it.
And I think actually that kind of, because that's almost going to be my next question. What is it and why is it important? But actually, that whole thing about I've just hit the mic, so sorry. But that whole thing about proactive security, preventative security kind of measures. Because I think it's incredible still the amount of times that we'll see some kind of incident that has been triggered because there's been a system that's not been patched. The patch has been out for 3 years, and actually the patch was never applied. And then that leads to, some kind of security incident, some kind of breach, and that'll end in a ransomware attack, data theft, whatever it might be. I think it's a huge thing. I mean, why are people, not in general, but why can people be bad at patching stuff?
I think it's because it's not, in a lot of cases, done systematically, and in a lot of cases, there's a misconception around what needs to be patched.
Yeah.
So we'll touch on the first one. So when we're talking about systematic patching, what we're talking about is actually having a process around ensuring everything that needs to be kept up to date is kept up to date. So when we're talking about patching in a network, we're talking servers, endpoints. That's pretty much a given for most people. I'm going to update my machine using Windows Update, for example. But things that sit on the network, like, for example, IP cameras, they will receive security updates. They're often overlooked. Things like printers, scanners, other network devices, they often get overlooked. So having a systematic approach whereby there is a window, normally 14 days, whereby patches get released and they get applied. If it's not done kind of systematically against all systems, you can end up with things not being up to date, or an incomplete patching process whereby certain updates are applied but others are missed. So systematic approach to patching. I think the misconception element is there's a misconception still that if I run Windows updates, my machine is fully up to date. Now, if you run Windows updates or operating system updates, we're not going to roll out Mac, we're not going to roll out Linux because they all offer updates. They should be applied, but they're only targeting the operating system and maybe some key applications. Microsoft Office will get patched with the operating system in some cases, but that's not everything that runs on your machine. If you think you've got a web browser on your machine, is that up to date? That's not getting applied when you do the operating system patches. You might have things like Adobe Reader. Is that getting up to date? So it's about making sure that everything is kept up to date, not just your operating system, but the applications as well, and the firmware.
So you make a very good point actually about that kind of whole thing about it's not just my updating Windows and Microsoft Office, but there's a whole bunch of other things that need updating. So does that lead to one of the challenges with this though? That because one of the things I'll hear a lot is that actually patching is complicated, patching is difficult. Is that true?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, patching is difficult.
On that bombshell.
Yeah, no, it's true. I'm not going to make any bones about it. Patching is hard, and the larger the network gets, the harder that problem becomes. Unfortunately, the larger the network gets, the more vulnerabilities you've got, because the more applications are installed, the more devices that are out there to manage. So patching can be a difficult task, but there are tools available to help people to do it. So if we look at a Windows estate, for example, we've got WSUS. We can patch devices centrally from a Windows server, and that can push down key applications and operating system patches to devices. That's a great mechanism to make sure that a large number of devices are up to date. And then if we look at kind of third-party applications, we've got tools. We offer these tools as part of our MSP package as well. So easy to consume. There's a whole plethora of third-party patching tools whereby an organization can install it on the endpoints. It'll inventory everything it's installed. When updates come out for that package, you can orchestrate the delivery of that package to that device. So you can build out an automation that says, when this vendor, so I'm going to pick on Adobe Reader, when Adobe release a patch for Adobe Reader, let's make sure it's applied within a certain amount of days. So it's about that. Now, what can be quite tricky with patching is off-network patching. So when a device leaves your corporate network, goes out and about, let's say it's someone that mostly works from home, we need to make sure that the tools that we are relying on to keep that device up to date and secure, but patched, can trigger even when that network isn't available to the end user because they're on their home network. So that comes down to kind of tools that you use to patch it. But also, it can fall to end users to do. We do a lot of work around CyberEssentials. One of the key areas within CyberEssentials is making sure that patches are applied frequently, and there is a process around that. That process doesn't have to use tools. You don't have to make an investment in third-party patching tools if you don't want. You can say to your users, make sure that operating system updates are applied, make sure that you keep your applications up to date. And if you've got relatively tech-savvy users, they'll be fairly comfortable with it.
But I suppose that kind of leads to a point I was thinking about while you were talking about, patching is complicated, because patching is not only complicated in so much that, you have to consider the mechanism that you've got, but actually it can be impactful on end users, but also impactful on the business as well. So, have you got any tips about how people manage the patching process, both for their end users, where we're asking them, maybe you can patch this stuff yourself, through to where we're having to think about patching servers and applications that are maybe running the business?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that in an organization where you've got a collection of users that are relatively tech savvy, there's no harm in saying, make sure that your device is patched. They will understand what that means, and you can, kind of stipulate, make sure that it's done every 2 weeks. But that's not every organization. The larger the organization gets, the more devices are going to be out there, the more you need to make sure that those patches are applied correctly, and don't cause any unexpected downtime. So what I would always recommend is, once you've got an environment of, say, I don't know, over 50 endpoints, start to look to say, okay, we're going to fire off a patch to a test device or to a couple of users who are relatively tech savvy first, maybe a day or two after the patch is released. So a patch comes out, we're applying to these users and we evaluate them for about a week, make sure that there's no downtime, make sure that there's no impact to the applications before we do it wider. And the reason why I'd encourage that is because if you just do it to the whole base to begin with, if there is an issue with that patch, and it does happen, you need to roll back that patch. Rolling back that patch on a couple of devices versus doing it across the entire estate of, say, 50 devices, that it's a lot harder to do with more devices. And before you do anything like that, make sure that you've got a backup. Obviously, if there is an issue with that patch and it causes downtime, you don't know whether that machine is coming back online again or not.
I was going to say that because obviously doing that with a user device is one thing, where maybe you can roll back an application patch.
Yeah.
But actually, when you're starting to look at patching servers where you've got the database that's running the entire business, assuming they're not running the business on an Excel spreadsheet. Referencing a previous episode.
Yeah.
But is there any different tips that you'd give for that kind of server patching?
Yeah, tread carefully. Make sure that you understand what the patch is doing. First of all, Microsoft, all the vendors will describe what it is, describe why the patch is important, describe the vulnerabilities, so the CVE codes as to what is actually being patched. And have a plan for if that doesn't work. Take a full system backup. If you've got a HA system, so you've got two databases, a standby and an active one. Fail over to the standby one, patch the active one, test it, fail back, test the other one. Do it non-disruptively. I think one thing that I will mention about patching is about vulnerabilities. We can't talk about patching and not talk about vulnerabilities. A lot of people focus on CVE numbers, so the threat score that is given to a particular attack vector. CVE, and it will be given a score out of 10, 10 being really bad, 1 being, be aware of it, but it's not so bad. A lot of people will only patch, say, 7 and above, because frameworks that they're on will stipulate that's the case. And they'll only focus on 7s and above, so they only patch them. But it is important to patch everything. The reason being is that a CV of, say, a score 5 may come out and you may think, oh, okay, well, that's not really relevant to us because we only patch 7 and above. But actually, the software and the way that you use that software, that CV5 is a lot greater risk to you than the CV7, because maybe one device is applicable to the CV7, whereas you've got maybe 200 devices on the CV5.
Well, you kind of answered what was going to be our next question about, because patching can be complicated because there's so many things to patch. How do you go about prioritizing? And actually, that CVE thing's really interesting, isn't it? Because there's a real difference between things where the vulnerability is a particularly high scoring vulnerability, but there's also a whole point about how prevalent is that, and actually how prevalent is that to you as an organization as well?
Absolutely, yeah. I would say, you can't not focus on the higher scores first, because they are the ones that will do the most damage or maybe be the easiest to get into. You've got to close those doors. Yeah. But don't negate the lower risk ones. If you've got maybe a CVE of risk 5 and daisy chained with a CVE of 3, those combined as a force multiplier, that could be what brings down your network. And if you're not patching them at all, you're always going to be susceptible to them. So, prioritize. Make sure that you're tackling the stuff that's going to do the most damage. Once you've tackled them, look at what's next. Patch everything.
And I think most tools that you'll use in that space, from everything from WSUS to maybe specific patching tools, will help and advise in that space as well. They're going to help you understand what things are vulnerable, how many vulnerabilities you might have, and kind of where to attack.
Yeah,
first.
Exactly. If you're using a third-party software, you will often get a report to say, these are the ones that are most susceptible to you or most applicable to you. These are the highest risks, and therefore we recommend that you start with these. What you may find is that by patching them, you may address some of the low risk ones. But once you patch them, don't take it that, okay, well, we're okay now. Patching is a never-ending task. Yeah. You do it this week, and you do it next week, and you do it the week after, and you do it infinitum going forward. Patches are going to be released. Vulnerability is going to be found. Patch.
Well, patch feels like a good place to end. But if we wanted to give people a couple of takeaways here, things that if they're thinking, they're not thinking, should I patch or not? I'm sure everybody watching this is thinking, absolutely, I should patch. But any tips you can give them, a couple of tips on about how they can ease the burden that comes with patching?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so first of all, look at the tools that are available to you. Different networks operate differently, and networks are managed in different ways as well. If you don't have a patching process, quickly go and define one. That should be homework today. That is, start that today. If pause the episode, go and do it, and then come back. It's that important to have a patching process, and look at the tools that are going to make it easier for you. A lot of organizations may be quite reluctant to invest in those tools, but actually, you're going to tie up someone for, it's a full-time job by the time you get into 50 endpoints, keeping that up to date. Make the investment, buy the software that's going to make it easier for you. If you're not sure how to do it, we can do it for you. We have MSP, pay-per-month offerings that can take this on for you. We will patch it for you. Don't let it sit there. Don't ignore it.
Well, I think that feels like a great place to stop. And, I think maybe summed up in the phrase patch.
Patch.
So, yeah, I'm all on that. So #patch is a key takeaway from this show. Jakes, that's been great, though. Thanks for your insight.
No worries.
With experience with patch management. So if you've enjoyed the show and want to make sure you catch all future tech takeaways, I'll try that with my new teeth next week, or future tech takeaways, then do subscribe. You can subscribe here on YouTube or in all good homes of podcasts, and possibly some bad ones too. But until next time, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next Tech Takeaways.